Reset. So we're going to work on some restorative bone therapy today. It'll be a really good blend of creating kind of an inner wave of motion into still point pose pattern. So let's get into it. Let's start with our chair against the wall. You need a belt to begin. And if you have some blocks and maybe perhaps a ball, you just put that beside your mat, because you could use a block instead of a ball for some of that work if you don't have a little squishy ball. So place your belt unbuckled on your chair seat, and then get a feel for the stance of your legs. So you have a setting of your feet in a pressure and a reach back with your hips, like you tip to bow in towards the pose. Set your palms on your chair seat. Chair seats are not really that big, right, for your whole hand expression and plus some. They probably just really get your prints on them. So I want you to use this as a moment where you put your palm prints into the chair seat and take a reasonably long step back. So a type of reach back where you're extending yourself a little bit, like it's a stretch. So to cultivate that path of breath dimension, I'm kind of studying a little bit on, three-dimensional breath, something like crocodile breathing, where you can really work with that breath kind of moving around the ribs, not just in the front. So when you have your hands on the chair and you let your head lower down between the arms, make a set of footprints that it's a little milder than the handprint, right? You can feel that it's balancing on the corners of the feet. And as the head is between your arms, let your wave of the spine reach back. So if there's no arch pattern, like 3 arches, you might feel just the 1 arch and that deep strength in your spine. And enjoy just the field of awareness of breathing. If this is a little too rich of a stretch for your arms or your shoulders, you could walk your feet forward towards the chair and bend the knees. It's completely appropriate. In this way, we can work with the breathing, expanding. Since the body is in a little bit of a face down position, which is considered prone, apparently easier on the movement of breath, but when you're standing with the muscles in a full reach, it's a little more intense. So let's try to let the breath move in through the nose. Doesn't have to be that long of a breath, but keeping the breath kind of calm. Try to get the back muscles to feel like they're stretching. Don't get too focused on how perfect the rib movement is with the breath. Just breathe. You might need to exhale out of your mouth. If you can focus on nose breathing as often as possible, relax the mouth, the tongue. Okay, now when I bring that weight into my hands, I want you to work a little bit on alternating to up dog and then back. So it doesn't mean that you have to step your feet as far back as possible, but step the feet back so the feet are close to each other with a little spacing. And then move the hips forwards and lift the chest. Make sure your hands are pushing into the chair. And then alternate. Reach the hips back. I would try to stay a little bit on the balls of the feet. Don't get too forceful on the heels pushing down. But the place you might have to be careful is the hyperextension of the back of the leg when you move back. So if you do feel like that's really sweeping, keep on the balls of the feet, but bend the knees slightly. Okay, so alternate a couple more times. Try to get some warmth into the spine and the shoulders abroad. Feel the bend of the knees. Last time. And then as you come back halfway, step in towards the chair, take a hold of your belt, standing up. You'll probably see most of me, except where the belt is probably. Okay, but I want you to hold your belt so it's wide. And as you lift it up overhead, it is overhead on me. It's not quite on top of my head, it's stretching up higher. And facing to the wall, you're going to step the right foot up. And it's a pretty pure lunge. This is not anything too extra special, but feel where that standing leg, I want you to still hold on to the belt overhead. And the belt could be your choice of width, but you want to find that the standing left thigh, you're working on how to import the natural, and the key is the natural arch. So instead of trying to force moving your tailbone under, which would make your posture kind of poor, you're working on this elevation out of the ribs. I find that kind of funny because I try to get my quad to get some length, but it creates the poor posture for my intestines and my breathing muscles. So use the belt to help you create, I guess, pure posture. Let's work with that. Just stay with that set of lifting. So simple. I guess the simple things are best, huh? Even with posture. Keep it simple. Simple ingredients. Okay, and as you lower down the right foot, that was it. You're going to reach down into the balls of the feet. The feet might have to separate quite a bit so you can balance. Lift up your heels. If your hands holding the belt get tired, you can bring the belt down. You could also bring the belt behind you. Not that you have to do all these poses together with your arms to open the chest. You could try that. See if you can feel the lift and the trial and tribulations of lifting your heels. Okay, if your feet are pushing out to the side, that would be natural, which I think is humorous because you would think the center of the foot would be a stronger place to put your platform. So now lower the heels back down. For those of you that have the belt overhead, I want you to bring it behind you. Okay, step the left foot up onto the chair and feel where the weight transfers in the bottom foot. The right foot, is it on the side? Is it trickling towards the base of the big toe? I want you to try for that. Right? You're like trying to land into a good arch support. Okay, you're making your own supports now. So when the arms are holding back, if it's a little too deep in the shoulder, you can have the hands closer. You can always pass on using the belt and just toss it and have the arms either holding the hips or straight out. But when you work with this balance of the lift, again, we're working with a natural arch for the quadricep on the right hip. So not trying to push the tailbone under. Okay, now lower down the left foot and taking a seat. So I want you to turn to sit onto the chair. Get a ball between the knees or a block. Either's fine. Okay, if you don't have a ball, just use a block. But as the ball or block is between, I want you to sit so you're kind of edgy on the chair. It's not in the very center. You're not sitting to the wall in the back. You want to use the chair kind of merely as a elevator for your poses, right? It just lifts up the floor to you. Now, I don't think you're going to sit in the middle of your space like this very easily without something under your seat. So kind of visualize when you put your hands back to the seat of the chair to open the chest again. What would it be like muscular-wise if you didn't have this chair to hold you up, right? It does create a little bit of support. So you would probably be accessing your rib cage. You'd be really big on the leg muscles, but use the chair merely as a place to remark points of contact and feel how your body meets it. And then I want you to squeeze the ball or block. I would have to make sure it's in a good spot to feel the squeeze. Squeezing and release the squeeze and breathe. So inhale, belly relax. Exhale, squeeze the ball. Try to keep the hands back. If this is too much on the shoulder, you can have a kind of a mirror reach behind you. You know, if you're not discussing the practice, you can easily work with the breath. And when the muscles of the legs respond, I want you to get a feel when you go to neutral with the legs, just with the item between them. Reach the left hand to the right leg and still keep the poise of the chest forward for a moment. And then get a feel when the right hand is back on the seat, that you lift up the heart and then you turn to the right and you really isolate this mid-band of the body. So the left hand is on the side of that right leg. And when you turn, can you just relax the squeeze on the ball? So your emphasis is to keep the knees, both of them, especially the right one, so they are in the same line across from each other. And this would probably be a little tricky for most of us to access. The reality is when my hand goes to the leg and I twist, I tend to twist also with my hip. So this is such good fundamental work because we wanted to work our thoracic vertebrae, not our lumbar, to do the twists. So I think this is really good for our spine care. So if you want to squeeze the ball to help keep the knees in line, that could work too. It's kind of an extra effort. But as I work with that mild rotation, I could hold the arm of the chair if that gives me a little more clarity with the movement. And breathing. And with that exhalation, be careful that the right leg doesn't flush back, trying to move the hip. And then come back center and switch. So these are kind of warm-up exercises, right, for some of our upcoming poses. So you want to get a feeling of, I know it could be different on the second side. You could notice that you know how to turn, right? You learned the first side. And your feet hopefully are still facing forward. They're not starting to twist inwards. But feeling the tug on the heart, on the diaphragm, strengthening the diaphragm. And if you need to be a little more mild on the squeeze of the ball, that's fine. Maybe that's helpful for some of us to be less squishy, right? And a little more of the capacity of the rib cage turning. You might do a little more of the ball squeeze. So inhale, feeling that reservation of the breath moving in. And the exhalation, letting go. Now, so many breath reservations. So from exhalation, right, comes mental relaxation, I think. And now come back forward. Let's enjoy a little forward bending. So we'll remove the ball. And if you have a bolster, or if you don't want to use a bolster for this one, you don't have to. You could just have the hands on the chair seat. But this is a little bit of an extra pulse of the position. So have the right leg lift, cross it over to the left knee, and you've been in this kind of seated pigeon pose. So it's a simple, you can't quite see, I'm just sitting centered forward on my chair, and I cross the right foot. So my ankle is right above the base of my left knee. And then when I lean forwards, and make sure I'm still on my chair seat, I lean forward, hands on the short end of the bolster. Yeah, you could do this minus the bolster, for instance. You could have your hands on the side of the chair. This is kind of nice too. Right? They're both good. I don't think one's better than the other. I just like to have a bonus prop here. So when you lean into it, get a feel of the hip circulation. Yeah, and focus on, if you do move into a more forward motion, downwards. It's not necessarily forward, it's forward and down. You know, notice is that more in my hip? So I want you to isolate the feeling. So if it doesn't add much to the intensity, I would stay higher up so that you can do a little less back rounding. It's kind of enjoyable to round, but get a feel of kind of a standard forward pulse. Okay, and then come back into center. You might want to uncross the right foot and just have the feet in a relatively wide stance and lean forward. Take that reach of the arms. Right? It's not a hip stretch at this point, right? It's a back reach. And then change the left foot up to the right. So I step my right foot in. So it's in line with my upper leg. Left foot crosses over to the right. I need a little helping hand to get there. And then as I lean forwards, you might get that feel surrounding the left hip. I know it feels different on the second side, just a little tad different on where the musculature is pulling. That's definitely a benefit of doing this for a while, and it could be a good awareness or a confusing awareness on how to help yourself find balance. Like you need a little notepad of your structural differences. That'd be an interesting workshop, how to make that work for everybody to get something and improve. So when you lean forward, notice how, and just on this side, not a comparison brain set as much as the moment here. So present, reaching, and if the back is in, if the shoulders feel a lot of the brunt of it, I would go a little farther back so you're kind of engaging. You can feel the paraspinals when you shift back, strengthen. Right, restoring that strength in the paraspinals. Okay, so now we're going to go full dive. Okay, bolster dive. So as you uncross that left leg, scoot the feet out to the edge, lower the bolster, and now you probably just set up a blanket. Just add comfort because you're already up here and you probably have a blanket nearby. So you're going to add the blanket kind of smack dab right where your feet are. And you'll still have this chair behind you when you lower onto the ground. So depending on what's your easiest method of movement downwards, part of living, right, is figuring out how to get up and get down. So when you lower down, I find my easiest stance is to have my feet wide, lean down, and then approach coming to a crawl. So my knees are on my blanket. And then as I scoot the bolster forward, I don't want the bolster on too far down my leg. So we're not going to lay on it quite yet. It might be what you thought was happening next, but let's back up here. So palms press floor, toes are either under or relaxed. Top of the foot is a nice way to do cat-cow too. So I would just sample how it feels on your knees with the toes relaxed and the toes under. I'm going to go toes under. So round your back into cat. Let the chin move towards the chest and the spine. Really create that rounded, stretched, flex state. Inhale, arch the spine. Exhale, round the back, so chin moves towards the chest. Inhale, arch. And exhale, rounding. Now find the path of moving back to that tabletop. And just notice how much arch that you create. It could be a little tiny bit of sensation. It might not feel like any difficulties here. And then I want you to transfer down to the bolster. So we're going to still keep a blend of this mild arch. We're going to lower down so the front of the thighs are on the bolster. And for me, my bolster doesn't go much farther down than kind of mid quadricep. It's actually kind of on the top part of it. It's not even that far down. It's certainly not at my knee. And then when I lower down, I'm going to lower my elbows to Sphinx pose. And then get a feel of the tops of the feet resting. Toes under is not required here. And the ability for me to work with that 3-dimensional breath. Some of you are familiar with crocodile pose, crocodile breathing. But the key here is the experience of breath in the back. So if my body pushes into a bolster, my breathing body, right, I have to kind of move my ribs in the back and span out. Okay, and since most of your lungs are back and up here, 70% or more is back there. It's nice to feel that interpretation. And I think that's curious because that part of the body tends to get pretty brick-like, right? The trapezius, the neck above it, where it gets a little tense. Okay, so take some care. All we're doing is elbows on the ground, forearms down, breathing into the back. I'm breathing into my belly, and that pushes into my back. So it pushes straight behind me. Okay, now when you do let the hands slide back, feel if you can really work your buttock muscles. So it's like my hands slide back and then my glutes kind of grip a little bit. Okay, so I want you to feel that grip of the glutes. You've probably noticed a pulse in the belly at this point. It's very exaggerated now. And then if I could bring my elbows a little farther back, my hands sweep back, zero pressure on my wrist, although I could feel a little stretch on one of them. I want you to get a feeling of the shoulders back. Try to lift the chest. Your hands should easily lift off the ground. You're not using them to get your spine to strengthen. They're props though. They are important. They're part of the levers, your leverage to work your spine. Lower down. We do mini baby back bends. Not many, but many. And then hands stretch out wide or fingers out wide. Lift up the chest, come back to table, scoot the knees in together. And I want you to take a step with the right foot, right leg to the right side of the mat, and then lean into the bolster with the left thigh. You might need to push the bolster back a little bit so it's close, really close to the center of the left quadricep. And then use the hands on the bolster to come up so you get a little better lizard pose. Lounge lizard, the lounging lizard. And if you decide you want your elbows on the bolster, this can work really well too. And if this is the one you prefer, lower and more intense, you might end up taking the bolster and turning it horizontal so it kind of holds the whole leg. But that way your elbows would have to be on the ground, right? If the bolster was horizontal, you wouldn't have this support. You could use your blocks. So I'll just demo that so you have an idea. If you're going to try that version, your pivot, it's a little broader in the leg support, I think. The right foot is still turned out. I shift my hips down. I have my blocks under my elbows. I kind of like this version because the thigh has a little more bandwidth. Wider thigh. Wider quad. Okay, both are fine. Bolster narrow, bolster horizontal. And now feel where the muscles on the inner leg weave, right? The right inner leg to the groins, well, through groins. And then as we slide back and shift sides, let's say you have the bolster this way, horizontal. Probably your best transition is to step forward to get back to the other side. For those of us that have it lengthwise, we just switch the right leg back and step the left foot forward. Those of us with horizontal will step the foot forward and then the right leg back, a little easier. And then the blocks on the inside. Either track you go with. And again, back to that kind of buttock muscle area. I mean, if you let that area kind of flap down and not have any muscular engagement, you might feel like you don't have an efficient use of your stretch. So some of us, that might be helpful. When I mentioned that, you could lean into it. Your blocks could be higher than this if you prefer. If your hands are on the bolster, it's different. But you could get a feeling almost like you're contracting in the right buttock, but not the left, because it can't contract because it's stepped out. So you're kind of a muscle master, how you're mastering your muscles. Just feel where the thigh band stretches down, the front of the back leg and the left inner leg. Simple. Breathing into the upper back. You relax the tongue and the mouth, focus on the nose, breathing. And now shift back with the hands onto the bolster or the blocks. Now we'll all meet at something somewhat similar. So I want you to come to a wide stance. So you're going to turn, bring your left foot into center. If your bolster is lengthwise, let's all just kind of get rid of our bolster on our mat and shift it to the side. Take blocks. If you haven't used them yet, get your blocks under your hands and turn to the right. So your left foot is in the front at your mat. And you've got a chair in the way a little bit. The feet, they're somewhat of a block, but you probably can measurably stretch your feet out to a width that the chair legs aren't going to bother you. But I want you to use your blocks here. So they're going to be either at the mid or the lowest setting. You're going to take a wide dog pose, or you could call it wide dog pose. The hands on the blocks, the chest stretching down, and a little careful in the leg muscles. So feel if you can pull the quadriceps up. Feel if you can relax them. Notice the feet parallel. That's a key. If they do need to turn in so you don't slide out, that's okay. I just don't want you to turn them out at all. Good. Okay, so we stretch the arms. The hands can go as wide as you want on the blocks. You decide on that. That's completely purely personal on that one. I actually like the leg of the chair kind of holding my leg. I remember doing something like this in my younger class where we used we had two chairs holding our legs. This is nice. So stretch the chest, let your head lower down, and get a feel for how the back muscles reach. Right, notice how the weight is into the feet, and then it transfers conveniently up into the back of the pelvis, the pelvic floor. And as that tone that you're trying to create in the legs, I want you to then slide the blocks in so they're as close to your feet as you can bring them. Now, if you don't find that you need these blocks to hold your balance and your flexibility, then you just don't use them. And you take your pose without your blocks, hands on the same line as your big toes, elbows move back, crown of the head to the blanket. Yeah, move the blanket however you please. But if you find that your hands are better on the ground or your blocks and you want to keep your elbows straight, that just works better, whether they're on height or not, that's your pose. Soften the knees a little bit, just a micro bend, and then move the body, the seat of your body, your seated field up towards the ceiling. Crown downwards. Some of you will have your head lifted. Some will have head down. Okay, now pressing into the hands. The legs are going to do it anyway. And then scoot your feet a little closer in so you have good grounding. And then slide the blanket off of your mat. Now you got a big clump of props on one side. Hands up to your hips. And then when you do lift up, I want you to stand so that you're working on the quads kind of lifting. Now scoot your feet in, turn your right side to the chair, hands onto it, and then let the legs have two track so that you're working your way into a standing straight leg forward bend into the chair. We could give it a technical name, but instead of using that, let's keep the standard of I see my leg, it's extending, my foot is under the chair, my left leg is stretching back, the foot is parallel, although it's not easy to keep that back leg reaching down to the heel. Let's say your back foot doesn't go parallel on this one. Let's say your foot's turned out, you're having difficulty, and it's like the calf feels like it's going to, some people it's too much and it feels like it's going to pull the calf. So you could put a blanket under your heel. That's an option. It's not going to be a long pose, but if you're here and it's just so much, you could use a blanket right back there under the heel. So my foot is straight forward with the toes. It makes it a little easier. Not exactly what everyone will need, but it's an option if you feel like it's easier. Okay. It's actually going to be a springboard coming up. So when you have the palms pressing down, the legs are in a form of straightness. I want you to bring your right hand to your right. Well, actually not to your, well, it is the right sacrum, isn't it? So hand back and turn the waist, but keep that right knee aiming forward, not twisting the knee, and turn the waist and feel how the ribs rotate. Yeah, turn. Okay, now the leg has this kind of twisting, rotation. So let's bring the right hand back to the chair. Slide the right foot back and just kick the left foot up. There, you could use that blanket as a little spring. But kick the left foot up and just purely feel how now that leg that was turning a little bit. Now you're going to turn the upper leg, the left leg, turn that to the left. Yeah, the left hand could stay on the chair, it could go to the back bar, it could go to the wall, it could go up to the ceiling. You could fall over with it. The wall is nice, isn't it? Just to have the ability to kind of push away from it. I like this kind of sensation using the wall, stretching the torso. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be some perfect half moon pose, but you get a feeling of the rotation cycle. So turn back to the chair seat, left hand comes down, switch, bring the left foot forward, the right foot back. And I want you to work your way. Now, if this blanket's not something you're using, don't even need to entertain the thought of it. If you have your heel down and it's fine, then go with that. But if it feels better with the blanket, it's nice to sample things out. Now, this side, I have a little bit more of a wide stance with my torso because my foot's farther than under the chair. It's closer to, I can see it. So I need to get back to that. The foot is under the chair. That's important here for your hip. So it puts a little more charge in the left hip bone, a little more weight bearing through the heel, striking up to the hip. And then turn to the left, bring your left hand back. We're going a little faster on the side. But feel where the rotation is in the mid body. Maybe you don't get the breath in the ribs. Maybe it's sort of you're kind of chugging breath here. But get a feeling of rotating. What I want you to kind of play with is how these, even half moon is sort of like this. I mean, it's basically taking your center of gravity and just twisting it. Okay, so bring the waist back to center, kind of play with it. All right, and then slide the left foot back so that you can see it underneath your knee. And then lift up the right leg. But if you're too close to the wall, like your head's gonna hit the wall, you can always take your chair a little bit back, because I don't want anyone to have some fear they're going to hit the wall with their head. So when you lift the right leg up, try to turn the waist. It's not that different than revolved triangle with the movements and that you're asking your bones to do. It's just that you're on one leg doing it. That's the difference. Okay, so hand can go to the wall. Yeah, hey, this one, continues to be a little challenging no matter how many decades you do it, right? Unless you spend, hours every day trying to hold the pose. But get a feel when the waist turns and the strength building into your hip bone. Okay, and then if that right hand is on the wall or it's up to the ceiling, yeah, you might give it a few moments trying to balance. Good, your arm to the sky. Why not? Okay, as the weight is transferring into your foot, that's kind of flopping a little bit, the bottom foot. At least mine is, trying to hold it. Lower the right hand to the chair. Feel if your foot has a better imprint with your hands on the chair. Turn. And then let's step both feet back and take a moment of that up dog with the chair. So reach the hips forward, both hands, palms on the side of the chair, lift up the chest, breathe. You can push up the balls of the feet so you have a little better stretch in your hip flexors. I don't know if anyone understands that, but instead of me pushing back to my heels, I'm pushing through the balls of the feet, lifting my heels, they slide forward, stretching my hip flexors a bit more. Okay, now let's go ahead and lower down to the knees and take an easy lean back to take a seat in front of the chair. Maybe this is considered the back of the chair, I don't really know, but the seat of the chair is at your feet. Take a blanket so that it's behind you flat, and I have not much height on my blanket there. I could do a quarter fold like this. Some people prefer that, but I'm just gonna go flat so my neck has less flexion. Okay, now that our heart rate has gone up a little bit, now we'll change the heart maneuver. Okay, so chair is at the wall. That's pretty important here. And then I want you to take a ball and have your blocks nearby. Set them nearby on either side. You could have one on each side. That would probably be best for this one, but it would block your vision on me, so I'm not going to do that to you. Now scoot yourself so that you're laying on your back and your feet are on the chair. I know some people will put their heels, like their calves on the chair to start this one, but that's definitely not going to be good on my back because it will tug on my spine, and it would probably be a worse experience ending class for you than even not doing this. So I would encourage you to have your feet at the edge. You could probably figure a way to do it in other ways, but feet on the edge, ball between the knees. If you don't have a ball, use a block. And then when your legs are just holding the ball, merely holding it, you're going to let the belly move so the diaphragm shifts down, so the abdomen expands. It actually just kind of lifts. And then on the exhale, the belly moves towards the back, right? But also pushes the lungs, deflates. CO2 goes out. Okay? So when you do push down into your feet next time or so, you're going to lift your hips and stretch your arms back. Now the arms probably don't have a purposeful stretch like you're anticipating effort, but they do move with the flow of the spine. So I want you to sense that. I know your spine, you think of it maybe not as a lever because it's in between, it's in the center of the body. But when you do push into your feet, which are levers, and you lift up, think of that spinal area kind of as a middle lever, and you're reaching your arms over, and then you're basically massaging through the spine when you lower down. And as you inhale, feel the belly expand. And exhale, push into your feet, lift the hips up, let the spine gently move into the shoulders. Arms could stay by the side the whole time as well. I'll do one like that. So you choose, but when you do lift, I want you to get a feeling of the hips motion. Okay, now try at one time squeezing the ball, just kind of get a feel for that. And it doesn't have to be the most squeeze you can do. You might just get a feel, okay, maybe my leg muscles connect to my hip, into my spine that way. However, you can kind of wake up the internal pathways is what we're going for. Okay, let's settle down. And then I want you to remove the ball and take a block. I think one is going to be fine. So we'll push into feet, lift the hips, slide the block at the mid setting under. Okay. And then legs straight up, Viparita Karani, inverted action. Blanket is not under your shoulders, it's under your head. And it might connect so it's in much of the neck, the blanket, but you want to get a feel that your throat, this whole area can soften. So you could always palpate it. This is kind of the whole lymph drain idea that we're working with. So if you're inverted, you probably sound usually a little bit nasally. You should have a sound change with it, not necessarily with your breath, but it is a little bit more in the throat, right? It kind of holds there. So purposely let the arms be down by the sides, so they're below the heart. And keep the energy of the legs. Not necessarily do they have to be effortful, but feel when they're side by side. And you're not pushing into the feet, right? There's no awareness of weight collection in the feet. So it's like you can finally be in your body, awareness inverted. So nice circulation inside. So just notice how you put weight into your block, in your shoulders. Maybe you move your legs a little bit forward. Now let's try that. Let's bring the knees to bending. Keep the block underneath you. If it's low, you can keep it low. If it's mid-height, you might change it in a moment. But then let the legs rest on the chair seat. And I like this one where I kind of let the legs almost feel as if the hip flexors are relaxing, but they're also kind of, there's a very minor amount of reaching through them, inverted reach. So it's not like I'm trying to push my knee towards the wall, towards the chair and the wall. I'm trying to trust gravity, but also how I lie on the block is important. I'm not gripping my glute muscles. I'm just letting the prop put me in the shape to support the circulation. Right, all we do is we put the body in shapes that promote healing. So that's all we're up to. And the props are so helpful to initiate that circulation. But being in the pose for some time is generally helpful to regenerate. Of course, if you need the block lower, bend the knees, put the feet on the chair, lower the block. You know, I like this on my calves. I can feel the pressure of the chair. So I try to just let the calf kind of smoosh into it. Okay, now walk the feet. Don't walk them too far away, but just bring your feet to the chair seat, knees point up. And as this is kind of a process of movement, feel how the feet push. And then just delicate motion. So when I push into my feet, it moves into my shoulders. The energy moves into my shoulders. So I find this moment is really nice to just stay with for the awareness of my shoulders. I'm trying to get the balance in my shoulders even. This would be kind of like shoulder stand, -1, right? It's really the basic generic awareness of how you put weight inserted into the shoulders. Okay. So as I push into my feet, I'm going to lift the hips up off the block, just enough to get it away. That's it. I don't want more intensity. Just keep it simple. And then the palms are turned open, and you're going to let the spine do its work to lower down. Go slow. It's critical, right, to your intelligence and the core, the organs. Lower down so you can feel that there's actually energy musculature going into the circulation in the core, the organs. Okay, once the spine settles, B, back pelvis settles. Notice the pelvis settle, and then I want you to keep the knees in this frame. They're not into your chest. That's important. Don't shock the sacrum. Keep the knees away. They can be straight up from the hip, but just not pull them in. And then roll to the side, so your knees are still in that same frame. And then push with your hands to come up. And let's just slide our blanket in. Okay. All right, we're gonna slide our blanket in close enough to the chair. Probably won't be perfect, but I'm gonna sit on it. Let's see if I can get this to work. What I want you to have is the blanket. So there's just a little fold of it. It's a little fold. It's not going to be a quarter fold because it just won't be enough blanket for you to put your rear on. That's why. And then you want to have a little lap. So when you pull your left foot towards the right knee, or sorry, the right thigh, what you'll need, knee, is your ball, I think. Maybe some of you don't need this ball, but it's kind of a little buoyancy for the side of my knee. So, if you think back to some of the Iyengar classes maybe you've done in the past, there's oftentimes a use of like something inside if you have some knee restrictions or it hurts. So the ball is just a really good support like that. You don't have to take a belt and fold it 6 times perfectly. You can just put the ball inside of the knee and off you go. So my right leg is slanted. That's not good. So I want my leg to stretch to the wall so the leg stretches from the hip. There's like a thigh, so I can't really see if it's exactly straight with the bone because there's all this flesh on the side of it, but I can kind of tell from my hip bone to my knee, it's a pretty good line, all right? It's like you need those pants that have like the skeleton drawing on them. This is a good week for that. Halloween pants. Okay, take a sandbag to the left thigh. Serious group. And then reach the right elbow to the chair. If you're facing away, it'll be easy to follow. But the right elbow is on the chair. The armpit is stretching. So you've got this flesh in the arm stretch. And then if you have a really extended arm, like it's longish, you might be able to kind of hold the back bar of the chair. Okay, that might be easy for you. For me, it's not natural now. It's not reaching. So I can have my head resting in my hand. But I want you to keep it real simple with the sand on the left thigh, upper thigh, right to the hip, and then let the left arm relax behind you. And be careful that this right leg doesn't turn in. The foot is straight up the wall. And your leaning capacity it's pretty mild. It's not like if you were to lean down and put your elbow on the floor inside the leg. It's like you have this progression of support from your sitting bone up into the right side of the waist. It's just the right amount of it to keep anchored in the pelvis. Get a little lift of the left hip, kind of the lip of the hip is lifting. And resting your brain. Closing the eyes. Breathing. Yeah, if you feel that right foot turning in, just stay with awareness of pressing into the wall. We'll take a mild twist. So we have the body parts all set for a good rotation. We did this earlier with that when we're sitting in the chair, but it's a little different with the span of the knees. Okay, so when you do come up to hold on to the left knee this time, you're going to rotate off of the axis of the spine, but now you've got the weight in the sitting bones a little different, right? The weight is gently in the right sitting bone, but it's primarily in the left. So I want you to try to get a little weight, a little more into the right sitting bone. So that means you just don't look like you did very much. But it's okay. You want to find better arrival in the shape where it's pleasant, it's a meditative position, it's not forceful. So feel where the experience is through the ribs, and then feel where that turn is to the left. Unwind, relax the grip with the hand, remove the ball. Actually, you don't have to. Let's see. So you'll take your stand to the right thigh, top of the thigh. You'll use your hands behind you to help bring the right knee to bending. You'll turn to face the chair. So you're on the blanket still. I actually like this bone in my left leg now, making this kind of easy. So I'm simple, cross-legged, right leg forward of left, as I mentioned, and then bring your hands to the chair seat. You could work with the poise of upright. You could go a little farther forward and lean. And this is still a good perspective, right? You could put your elbows crossing the arms, bring your forehead to the chair or to your arms, which is better for me. So if I go for forehead to chair, I'm getting too much rounding. So this is still taught in, all the cycles of stretching, even if there's this idea of the neck forward, just so that we can edge into our back. I kind of release some of that. So feel what's appropriate for your position. Maybe it is not appropriate for you to put your head down, and you're better with your circulation with your hands on the chair, holding it, and just feeling a little bit of a tip through your head. And that's okay too. Yeah, again, measure the focus into your hips. Slide the hands back on the chair seat to come up to sitting tall. And then we'll take the sand's going to stay on the right thigh. So all we'll do is uncross the left leg from under the right, stretch the left foot to the wall, move the ball, if you're going to use it, under the right knee, and then I'll be turning this direction, but I'm still here. Okay, so turn. Okay, I'm more here than ever. Okay, now as you put the ball under that right knee, notice if the right leg doesn't stay touching the left leg, that's completely fine. In fact, it might be better for some people's knees. So if my foot is close to the foot of the chair, I'm good with that. Okay, but if I want to jam it to the leg, I'm not so good with that on my knee. So I want you to feel like this is the reason we have the leg, the levers, is to give some base foundation for the middle. Because this is what we kind of care the most about. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think about like digestion and organs and spine a lot more than I think about my quadricep, although maybe that's not true, or my knee. But this is an area to care for a lot. So when I turn, I want to feel like that's hydrating, lubricating motion for the core. And then when the arm goes up to the chair, I think for some of you, you're probably leaning into the chair because you're tall, right? But for some of us, we have to kind of lift up onto the chair seat a little bit. So it's very unique to each person. And as the arm is reaching to the chair, you decide if you want to kind of get farther into the chair with the arm. That's more of a stretch. You want to be on the edge, right? You get to decide. How does that work into your waist, right? When you're up, yeah, that's better. Right hand behind you, you decide. And then lean and turn. Feel where the weight is on the left sitting bone. Feel where the pressure is in the left foot. Are the toes up on the wall with the left foot? I think by the second side you get that implemented. into your muscle memory a little bit more. But keep in the awareness that most of this is working on our muscle memory. So I think if you do these very relatable, elementary shapes, it gets a little bit more in your muscle memory. So probably we'll keep it pretty simple focus as time goes along, but basic leaning to the left, right hand behind you, shoulder back, breathing, feeling more weight in the left sitting bone. And now try to feel how weight goes from sitting bone to sitting bone. So center up, left hand to right knee. You're turning. Now here's the, I think I'm still figuring this out too. The SI joint, right? The sacroiliac. You want this to be an area of stability, not so much mobility. This is so important for our SI. So try to get your turn to come from your middle, right, your thoracic. If you feel a lot of pivoti that's cranking around these areas, and this joint, for me, I can isolate it now. I can turn kind of my leg a little bit, but I don't want this leg to twist. So push to the wall with your foot, the left foot, and then lift up the ribs, bring the right hand back to the ground, fingers stretch out, left hand to right knee, turn. Yeah, and some of us, it won't necessarily feel like I got it perfectly, but I'm aware of my motion. And the foot to the wall for me right now is fairly intense through my hip. I'm just aware of that kind of plugging into the foot. Okay, detach your hand from the knee. Carefully keep the heart lifting when you turn to the chair. And then take the sand to the left thigh. Bend the left knee, because that thigh is loaded with blood flow from pushing, so it should be good with the sand. Use your arms, your hands, follow your arms more, huh? And turn so you're facing the chair cross-legged. Hopefully not cross-eyed, but the left foot in front of the right. And as I reach up, I try to get a feeling of crown up. My tendency is to think reach up and I push my heart up, but I know that the work I could do is also just to keep it a little more pure and simple, upright, relax the face. Hands on the chair seat is really great for this. If you need the ball, it's still under your right knee, or for me, it rolled out, but put it back there. Or if you need it under the left knee, and then lean forward. Now you can stuff blankets in under your knees for any of these cross-legged positions. Maybe stuffing blankets would feel really good for you under your knees sometimes, so you can always try. You can push them away if you don't like it. And then if that's your new normal, that's good for now, but feel where the muscles are balancing in your hips. So we did a seated forward bend, seated in the chair in the beginning. And now we're kind of at the other side of the session, seated on the ground. It might not be as pleasant, I think. It could be a different layer. The other side you're dropping into gravity, so it's different force in the hip. Okay, breathing, a few more moments here. If you want to bring your forehead down to your hands. And when you do start to push into your arms and just bring that center line up, we're going to be working into the side. So I want you to remove, actually keep the sand to your left side on the floor, and then you're going to move your chair away. Actually, I'm going to put mine behind me. This is really nice for side stage. So I remember last class I thought, oh, I wish I had my chair back here. Okay, I think I may have missed that mark last time. So take a blanket, make a quarter full. We're gonna prep for side sage, and then figure out where your other blanket is and add it on top. So you got a couple of these. You also got your bolster now in the center. Okay, so center horizontal across the mat. Ball, helpful. Chair is really great for this. Some like to have like the traction and that kind of gravitational pull with the arm going towards the block or the floor, but you can make that work on this one too. So let's go left hip. If you start on the right hip on this, that'll be completely fine. So you can start on either hip you want to right now, either way. So find the hip of choice. Find the hip of choice. And then bring your sand across the right hip, or left hip, sorry, the hip of choice. Lean, I need more blanket under my brain. Okay, now I lean into the blanket, so it needs to meet my support. So it feels like, okay, I got some lift, and I'm not struggling with my breath or my neck to keep that support. So if you're struggling with your breath, get a little more blanket. Place the arm on the chair. If you don't like the chair, you can put it under the chair. You can stretch it open. You can have the arm on your side. But get a feel when that reach is occurring through the waist. And moving the sand is completely fine anytime in the pose. You're leaning into the left hip on the props. The knees are in a real kind of a lightning bolt in some way. They're zigzaggy, they're bendy. And the top leg could always kind of straighten out a little bit, but the wall might be in your way. Yeah, so, and I find sometimes I want to scoop my hip a little bit under. The more I concentrate on how I'm getting settled, we better be in it for a few minutes, otherwise all the settling, what is it worth, huh? And rest your brain so the eyes can close. And work with how your head is on the blanket. Maybe you turn it a little to the left. Maybe you turn it so you're a little more in the back of the skull. Just calming your attention. Slow, deep breaths. Now with the movement of the ribs, or perhaps you're just getting there, we're going to stay with this bolster underneath and slide your arm if it's on a chair. And if it's not, we also move our sand just right next to us. And again, try to keep the knees downward. So even if the knees cross to this left side, you still want to keep them away from the heart. And then try your best to rotate left so you can get the spine to rebound. If I fling onto the back, my muscles tend to grip. Some of us can just roll on our back and there's no grip, I suppose, but I'm going to rebound the spine and then turn. So I'm facing away from the bolster. I'm lying on the bolster. And I'm going to you can actually use a ball under your pelvis or a block. I haven't found the ball to be enough support for me, but some people find that to become nice to have the ball. It's a little squishy, you know. It might feel a little bit more suitable for some of us. So something under the back of your pelvis besides your bolster under your back. Set your sand across your ribs, and then you get to decide, do you want your blankets back down? I don't think you want it too much blanket here. Too flat is fine, but one of them turned up might be a little too much. But now, fuss and fuss. Okay. Oh, I'm so close to the wall. Okay, so I'm going to bring the feet into Baddha Konasana. It's going to be better for my hips, I think, on this one. So this might be a pattern where you work with that. So you might have your knees pointing up. You might have them touching towards each other in constructive rest. You might be okay with your legs straight down. Having your feet at the wall like this would be really not good on your back, especially because of the arch. So you could have your feet together, your knees out, and slide your feet closer to the wall. That could be suggesting adductor stretch and hip flexor stretch. So for us that have like this hip flexor, you know, it's very ribbed, intense stuff. It's kind of twangy. This is a good pose to do. It might still feel like you're stretching. It's a deep stretch, and you're working to keep there. So if it's just too much, go back to constructive rest. That's not going to stretch your hip flexors at all, but just keep in mind you don't want to be wishing your way out of the pose so soon. Let's give it a few moments. Sand should be set so you're doing a little workout with the sandbag. If you don't want to use sand, don't worry about it, right? But the workout with the ribs is lift and lower. Rib push-ups. Rib ups. And then let the mind center on the experience of breath. Well, it could move to the leg experience. It could move to the hip opening, but connect it to the space between the breath, which is the holding, right? So if I breathe in, I want to give a little hold and then exhale. You might not do like a 20-second hold, I understand. You're not in free diving practice, but just notice. And if that's not interesting to you, breathe, right? Just keep breath going, breath willing. Knees point up if your knees are up. Send your feet towards the hips. Feel that rib motion. Okay, now you could keep your sand on, you could conceivably keep this on when you go to the second side stage. It would probably be a little bit of a dance of weights and shifting, but you could try. So I'm going to shift my block away and then roll to my right. And this way you can keep the motion in the ribs. So you could play with that. Turning to the right. So you can get a little weight training practice going. Just be careful. If that feels like that's too, it violates pressure in the spine, just take it off and then put it back on. We don't need to cause any stress on you more. Okay, so place the sand to that left hip. Now, try with this shape that the arm reaches over. Yeah, and you know, I've been kind of ingrained after so many years with this Zoom session that when I go to my right side stage, I'm now more comfortable on my right shoulder to be a little bit counter rotated. So when I go back to what might be the recommended version, I've now got my upper back loose enough on one side more than the other that if I could get on the other side, it would be a pretty good shoulder. So it's something to just notice. How do you rotate? How do you roll your neck? You know, it ended up that the whole screen thing was helpful for that part, but that's not really that unusual. One side to change how you look around. But feel where the breath is. The sand could be more leg load than waist on one side. You could play with that. Feel the spine center. The right arm is relaxed between the bolster and the blankets. Your hand could be on the chair, could be on the bolster, could be a little bit of slow motion, or could be under the chair. Now the chair can hold you from bringing it over it. That could be useful. You can hold like probably the leg of the chair even. Okay, let's not get too creative on it. So feel where the side is reaching. You know, when you slide the hand down or back to move the sand, we'll keep the shift now. We're going to roll right, or if you were on the other side, then you know you're going that direction. Knee goes center, and then let's take our bolster to the base of the wall. We're going to do just one little spinal motion before we go legs up. I don't want you to go away without this. So when I lower back, I've got one blanket under my head. Could be quarter fold, it could be flat. But windshield wiper your legs, and it should be legs, not just like the knee. It should feel like you are massaging a little bit into your rear. Let's just say that. It doesn't have to be a muscle that we're focusing on. It's just you're massaging across. And if your knees are too close, it compresses the back. So you want to have more space with the feet on the bolster. You only got a bolster width, so use all of it that you can. It wouldn't be a bad thing if you were right on the all the way towards the edge, reasonably, so you don't fall off. Okay, and then bring the knees back center and take the feet close, bring the left leg over the right, cross the legs and bring the knees to the right. Let's just keep it kind of pure, not sanded. Not that sand isn't pure, but less distraction of moving things on top. If there's a bit of a squeezing with the legs, like it's compressing, just notice that. If that feels good for your knee, or if it's not, here's a modification. If you don't like the leg crossing, you can put a ball between the knees and have the knees go right. This is a perfect modification. Sometimes this feels good. Knees center and change sides. Last one, right leg over and then knees over. Now you could always use the ball besides the left leg too. You could just kind of push in and it's a nice, it's great. I wish I knew that on the first side. Never a class will go by. There's something that could have been improved. Never, never, never. Always an opportunity. And when you get a feel of the body weight towards the left, whether the knees are with a ball between them or you've got the leg crossed over, right leg over left, you know, feel how this kind of moves the back muscles, the low back. It's an interesting preparation for inversion. And now when you come back center, it's a pretty brief hip crossover. I want you to bring your knees towards the chest and roll to the side, any side. Come to the wall. You got your sand nearby, I suspect. And you got your blanket, so you can pull it in closer, get to the wall so your seat is on one side, and then swing the legs up. Now, if that's too quick of a shift, you take your time. You need to go walk around the room or take one more sip of whatever. Then come to the legs up, but you've got the leg lift so that there's this lumbar support. So I would be a little careful when the balance is centered on the pelvi. The knees have a little separation. It's really small though, isn't it? It's not recognizable, right? They're close. But with the sand, it will probably have the knees separate a little bit more. We can analyze this to the bone, right? All these structural changes, but I want you to feel like there's two sides, I guess, in this position. Like there's two It's not like a uni leg, I guess. So there's circulation. And that's because we want the lymphatic drain to go all the way up into the neck. And there's two sides. I don't know if you've ever had a swollen lymph node or something, but you know how it's a one side thing to feel. So that's why we're trying to get that fundamental flow on both, circulating. These are very science-like poses of inversions. They're pretty helpful for that. They're not such flexibility shapes as much as circulation. So you can add the support of your arms down. It could be cactus. I think below your heart is going to be a little more functional for what you're doing. It's going to get you cooler faster, but if you need to bundle up, you could put some warmth on you here, your other blanket. And ensure that the movement of the chest is harmonious with the movement of the torso. So you can feel there's a lift in the belly, but then it centers back. So you get three-dimensional breath. Three-dimensional breath. We are three-dimensional, so feel the movement of breath. And gather your attention on the even rhythm of your breath. And rest your eyes. Soften the face. Notice where parts of the face could use that instruction. Nose breathing. You can relax your tongue. You could swallow a couple times and then try to feel that fundamental breathe through nose. Breathe out. I find I get a little, sometimes just working with my muscle memory, that I go back to exhaling out mouth. It just gets kind of claustrophobic. That's my personal experience, but you might be very comfortable with that. So try it as often as you can. It'll just become a little more natural. It's definitely a more efficient filter than our nose. The mouth has a lot of other things it has to deal with. So try to give the instructions for each area specifically. Now feel where the weight is at the body level. Do you feel it in the hips or in the spine? And there are some days you might feel like it's all pretty balanced in this one. As you bend through the knees, shift the feet off of the wall and lower down the knees. You can toss the sand overhead from your feet. You can slide it off to the side. But as the feet come to the wall, bring the knees to easy bend. And you can feel the tailbone kind of in a peak lift, so the sitting bones are not centered anywhere. Okay? And just roll to a side and find your sitting bones on the bolster. Take a seat, feel where the balance is in the base of the spine, right? The nice thing of the awareness of a wall is that the base of the spine doesn't push into it. In this position, you can feel The back ribs maybe touch a little bit, or clearly the upper back will touch. So give yourself some grace with that space in the back, the great natural curve it is. And then the abdomen in the front relaxing. Okay, feel where your natural gait is with your neck. It's probably a little forward. And let your hands slide on the legs together at the front of the heart, palms together. And with a moment of awareness of each of us connecting in this collaborative practice, just let your eyes close in and balance the mood, the maybe little dose of serenity and inner balance from practice. Inhale and exhale, bowing.